Good morning.
Good morning.
Sometimes in real life, it is very difficult to determine the dividing line between good and evil. But those who wrote fairy tales knew the dividing line. They knew that kindness and generosity equal good. They knew that selfishness and cruelty was evil. Oscar Wilde was just such a writer. Among his works of literature, he wrote The Happy Prince and other tales. In the end, each, the good or the evil, finds its own reward. And because of that message, that Christ-like quality which is found in these stories of Oscar Wilde, it seemed appropriate to bring another of them to you today. There's not always a happy ending in a fairy tale. Sometimes a sacrifice is necessary. Oscar Wilde's The Nightingale and the Rose. The young student cried.
She said she would dance with me if I brought her red roses, but in all my garden there is no red rose.
From her nest in the oak tree, the nightingale heard him, and she looked out through the leaves and wondered.
No red rose in all my garden.
The student cried, and his beautiful eyes filled with tears.
Ah, on what little things does happiness depend? I have read all that the wise men have written and know all the secrets of philosophy, yet for want of a red rose is my life made wretched?
The nightingale said, "Here at last is a true lover. Night after night I have sung of him, though I knew him not. And now I see him." Sorrow has set her seal upon his brow, and the young student murmured,
The prince gives a ball tomorrow night, and my love will be there. If I bring her a red rose, she will dance with me until dawn, and I shall hold her in my arms. But there is no red rose in my garden, so I shall sit lonely, and she will pass me by. My heart will break.
The nightingale said, "Here indeed is the true lover. What I sing of, he suffers. What is joy to me, to him is pain. Surely love is a wonderful thing, more precious than jewels. It may not be purchased of the merchants, nor can it be weighed out in the balance of gold." The young student said,
The musicians will play upon their stringed instruments, and my love will dance to their sound. But she will not dance with me, for I have no red rose to give her.
and he flung himself down on the grass, buried his face in his hands, and wept. A little green lizard ran past with his tail in the air and asked,
Why is he weeping?
A fluttering butterfly said,
Why indeed?
"Why indeed?" whispered a daisy to her neighbor. And the nightingale answered, "He is weeping for a red rose."
For a red rose.
For a red rose?
For a red rose?
For a red rose?
They cried.
How very ridiculous.
And the little lizard, who was something of a cynic, laughed outright. But the nightingale understood the secret of the student's sorrow, and she thought about the mystery of love. Suddenly she spread her brown wings for flight and soared through the air. As she sailed across the garden, she saw a beautiful rose tree, and she cried, "Give me a red rose, and I will sing you my sweetest song." But the tree shook its head and said,
My roses are white, whiter than the snow upon the mountain. Go to my brother who grows around the old sundial. Perhaps he will give you what you want.
And so the nightingale flew to ask the rose tree growing round the old sundial. But the tree shook its head and answered,
My roses are yellow as a daffodil that blooms in the meadow. Go to my brother who grows beneath the student's window, and perhaps he will give you what you want.
And so the nightingale flew over to the rose tree that was growing beneath the student's window and cried, "Give me a red rose, and I will sing you my sweetest song." But the tree shook its head and answered,
My roses are as red as the feet of the dove, but the winter has chilled my veins, the frost has nipped my buds, and the storm has broken my branches, and I shall have no roses at all this year.
"One rose is all I want," cried the nightingale. "Only one rose. Is there any way by which I can get it?" The tree answered,
There is a way, but it is so terrible that I dare not tell it to you.
"Oh, tell it to me," said the nightingale. "I'm not afraid." And the tree said,
If you want a red rose, you must build it out of music by moonlight, and stain it with your own heart's blood. You must sing to me with your breast against a thorn all night long. The thorn must pierce your heart, and your lifeblood must flow into my veins and become mine.
The nightingale said, "Death is a great price to pay for a red rose, and life is very dear to all. Yet love is better than life, and what is the heart of a bird compared to the heart of a man?" She spread her brown wings again in flight and soared into the air. The young student was still lying on the grass. His tears were not yet dry in his beautiful eyes. "Be happy," cried the nightingale. "Be happy. You shall have your red rose. All I ask of you in return is that you will be a true lover. For love is wiser than philosophy, though she is wise, and mightier than power, though he is mighty." The student looked up from the grass, he listened, but he could not understand what the nightingale was saying to him, for he only knew the things that were written down in books. But the oak tree understood and felt very sad. He was fond of the nightingale because she had built her nest in his branches. He asked her for one last song, and when she sang, her voice was like water bubbling from a silver jar. When she finished her song, the student got up, saying to himself,
The nightingale has form, that I can't deny. But has she got feeling? I am afraid not. Like most artists, she is all style without any sincerity. The nightingale thinks merely of music, and everybody knows the arts are selfish. Still, she has some beautiful notes in her voice. What a pity it is that they do not mean anything and do any practical good.
and he went off to his room, thinking of his love, and fell asleep. When the moon shone in the heavens, the nightingale flew to the rose tree, and she set her breast against the thorn. All night long she sang, and the thorn went deeper and deeper into her breast, and her lifeblood ebbed away from her. She sang first of the birth of love in the heart of a boy and a girl. On the topmost spray of the rose tree, there blossomed a marvelous, pale rose. The tree asked the nightingale to press closer against the thorn.
Press closer, or the day will come before the rose is finished.
She pressed closer against the thorn, and louder grew her song. She sang of the passion in the soul of a man and a maid. A delicate flush of pink came into the leaves of the rose, but the thorn had not yet reached her heart. The nightingale pressed closer, and the thorn touched her heart. A fierce pang shot through her. Pain, bitter, bitter was the pain. And wilder grew her song. For she sang of the love that is perfected by death, of the love that does not die in the tomb. And the marvelous rose became crimson, like the rose of the eastern sky. The nightingale's voice grew fainter, and her little wings began to beat. Fainter grew her song. She gave one last burst of music. The white moon heard it. He forgot the dawn, and he lingered on in the sky. The red rose heard it and trembled all over with ecstasy and opened its petals to the morning air. And the tree cried,
Look, look, the rose is finished now.
But the nightingale made no answer, for she was lying dead in the long grass, with the thorn in her heart. At noon, the student opened his window, and upon looking out, cried,
Why, what a wonderful piece of luck! Here's a red rose. I have never seen any rose like it in all my life. It is so beautiful that I am sure it has a long Latin name.
He leaned down, plucked it, put on his hat, and ran to the professor's house with the rose in his hand. His love, the daughter of the professor, was sitting in the doorway, winding blue silk on a reel, her little dog lying at her feet. And the student cried,
You said you would dance with me if I brought you a red rose. Here is the reddest rose in all the world. You will wear it tonight next to your heart, and as we dance together, it will tell you how I love you.
But the girl frowned and said,
I'm afraid it will not go with my dress, and besides, the Chamberlain's nephew has sent me some real jewels, and everybody knows jewels cost far more than flowers.
Angrily, the student said,
Well, upon my word, you are very ungrateful.
He threw the rose into the street where it fell into the gutter, and a cartwheel went over it. And the girl replied,
Ungrateful? I'll tell you what, you are very rude, and after all, only a student. Why, I don't believe you have even got silver buckles in your shoes like the Chamberlain's nephew has.
and she got up from her chair and went into the house. The student walked away, saying,
What a silly thing love is. It is not half as useful as logic, for it does not prove anything, always making one believe things that are not true. In fact, it is quite unpractical. In this age, to be practical is everything. So I shall go back to philosophy and study metaphysics.
So he returned to his room and pulled out the